Hey there, TBD listeners. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about a story coming up a little later. It's from one of our partners, SAP. Is your business reaching an exciting turning point? Are you ready to seize the moment for growth? When you're facing uncertainty, SAP can help you be ready for anything that happens next. To learn more, head to sap.com/be-ready and stick around to hear how a nationwide bakery seized the moment. Hey everyone, it's Lizzie. We have a breaking update on the show you're about to hear. After we'd put this episode to bed, Cruise announced that it was going to pause all its driverless car operations, saying, quote, "The most important thing for us right now is to take steps to rebuild public trust." Okay, here's the show. And please bear with my voice, it's a little scratchy.
Updated with a developing story out of San Francisco this morning. A hit-and-run driver struck a woman on Market Street, and then a driverless car ran over her. This was the police.
The crash took place on October 2nd in downtown San Francisco. After the hit-and-run driver left, the woman was somehow pinned underneath a Cruise autonomous vehicle. You can hear the horror in the voice of this paratransit driver, Lee Goins, when he describes finding her.
I stooped down, and I started finding out whether or not this person, hello, you okay? Then the person started moaning. As you see, there's still blood here. The person started moaning, and then I raised up, and I started yelling, "Anybody call the police? Anybody call the police?" 3 people said no.
The woman was eventually freed using the jaws of life and is reportedly still in the hospital. But what we didn't know until this week is that the Cruise car did not just stop on top of her after she'd been hit by the other driver. According to California's Department of Motor Vehicles, the Cruise did something else, something that almost certainly made the situation worse.
After the pedestrian was trapped underneath the Cruise vehicle tried to move to the side of the street with the pedestrian trapped underneath, traveling 20 feet at 7 miles per hour.
That's David Zipper, a visiting fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School. David has written extensively about autonomous vehicles, including here at Slate.
And there's video of this that allegedly Cruise did not share with the DMV, nor did Cruise share it with at least one reporter at TechCrunch who saw the video from Cruise that was presented as being the full story, but omitted that section where the Cruise vehicle was moving to the curb with this poor pedestrian trapped underneath it.
All of this led to a startling development on Tuesday. The California DMV suspended Cruise's permits to operate driverless cars in the state, effective immediately. Today on the show, David says it's not just about this one crash, as awful as it is, but about a pattern of questionable behavior by Cruise cars, vehicles that were supposed to be a glimpse of a driverless future, but which the DMV is calling a risk to public safety. I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming, like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This podcast is brought to you by Slate Studios and SAP. How do you know when to seize the moment for growth? When your opportunity arrives, you need to be ready. From expanding into new markets to hiring, business leaders face so many tough decisions.
My name is Ray Fager. I'm Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Kings Hawaiian, as well as Interim CIO. Kings Hawaiian is a family-owned company that began in Hilo, Hawaii in 1950. We make amazing sweet Hawaiian bread, primarily dinner rolls and hamburger buns. Our customers love us, but we're always worried about consistently making the same thing everywhere.
Not long ago, Kings Hawaiian began to grow. They needed to build a plant for a new product.
We have a secret formula. No one knows exactly what goes into our bread except for about 5 people in the entire world. We can't use a co-manufacturer. And because of that, we realized that the software we're using to currently manage our production facilities needed to be upgraded.
And with SAP technology, they knew they were ready.
The cloud technology is the thing that will allow us to control all the manufacturing processes from one place, analyze the dough we're making, and get a super awesome product out the door to the consumer. And it'll be exactly the same no matter where you buy it. We get help from AI with making sure the right people can view the right data sets and the wrong people cannot view certain data sets. That's really important in governing.
Kings Hawaiian seized the moment for growth. Will you? Head to sap.com/be ready to learn more.
Autonomous vehicles, aka driverless or self-driving cars, have been a feature on the roads of San Francisco since early 2022. The most prominent companies are Cruise, which is backed by General Motors, and Waymo, which is part of Alphabet. And in San Francisco, they operate as robotaxis.
It's basically like a Uber or Lyft vehicle without a driver. You use your phone to summon it, the car comes over to pick you up, and then it brings you where you want to go and drives off. It just doesn't have anybody in the driver's seat. It's instead using sensors and computers and cameras to be able to navigate the streets without a driver.
Before this week, how many of them were on the road in San Francisco?
As of early August, the most recent data I've seen suggests that there were several hundred, in the ballpark of 300 Cruise vehicles in San Francisco. Now, importantly, in mid-August, the California Public Utilities Commission, not the DMV, I mentioned there's 2 agencies, very confusing, but the California PUC granted a request from Waymo and Cruise to basically expand their services as much as they want in the Bay Area, as many vehicles as they want, even though that is actually something that the public leadership of San Francisco, the police, the fire, the transportation department, public leaders were all saying, please don't do this. This is not safe. It's not what's in the best interest of our city. The California PUC just effectively overruled them. And then we ended up with all these problems that led the DMV to crack down.
How do Cruise AVs differ from Waymo ones that Waymo is owned by Google? Do they?
There's a lot of ways in which the companies are going to differ. Some of it depends on how the technology works. Some of it's going to depend on how they handle certain situations from a safety perspective. It can get quite technical, but what I can say, just having looked at the data provided by the city of San Francisco, is that Cruise seems to get into a lot more bad situations than Waymo. Waymo gets into some, don't get me wrong, but Cruise seems to maybe have a higher risk tolerance for blocking traffic or messing stuff up than its major competitor.
The last time we had you on the show, we talked about some of the weird things that these cars had done, and they seem to range from the terrifying to like the kind of funny. Like, I remember we talked about a bunch of cars would continuously get stuck in like this little cul-de-sac in San Francisco, and the neighbors were going insane.
At several points today, they showed up on top of each other, these cars packed with technology, stopping in a queue as if completely baffled by a dead end.
Like, what have they done? Can you tell me kind of a rough list?
Sure. I mean, it does range from the terrifying, like crashing into a fire engine on the way to an emergency response.
Once again, a Cruise auto-driving taxi is causing problems for firefighters. This time, a crash with a fire truck and with a passenger inside. Cruise
to the deeply annoying, like doing a parade in a cul-de-sac or creating, gridlock on a street.
I hear all these horns blowing, and I look out, and there's all these driverless cars lined up all the way down Vallejo here.
Or halting a Muni bus that can't get around the vehicles that have halted in front of it. Then they get into the just sort of like silly and funny, but still revealing, like the Cruise vehicle that drove into wet cement and got itself stuck there, which, by the way, happened days after the California PUC, in all of its wisdom, decided to give totally open access to San Francisco to Cruise as well as Waymo. You think, great. Yeah, clearly the technology is working perfectly when a car is going to get itself stuck in the wet cement, something that I don't know any human driver has done in recent memory that I've talked to, at least.
Well, let's talk about this weird regulatory structure thing. In August, state regulators voted to allow self-driving car companies to expand their operations in San Francisco, other parts of California, and to charge people for robotaxis. The city of San Francisco said, whoa, don't do that. Can you lay out the positions of these two different regulatory bodies?
Basically, in California, you have the Department of Motor Vehicles that, as you might imagine, is responsible for overseeing the safety of motor vehicles, including like the vehicle run by Cruise or by Waymo. Then you have an entirely separate entity called the California Public Utilities Commission, which handles utilities, right? But because it already manages ride hail, which is a whole other issue. I'm not sure it should manage ride hail, but it does. The CPUC manages the operations of robotaxis, or oversees the operations of fare collection, ride hail-like robotaxi services. So basically, you need these robotaxi companies like Waymo and Cruise, and there's a couple others, they need approval from both groups to be able to provide robotaxi services that they are in San Francisco.
Why do these two agencies seem to see things so differently?
Great question. I want to be careful not to speculate too much, but it is jarring that it was really the PUC. Let me put it this way. The Public Utilities Commission is the one that has been in the spotlight over the summer, with the city of San Francisco saying we don't want any more of these robotaxis because they're messing stuff up and creating a public safety problem. But then the PUC members, I think it's 5 members of the board who vote. One of them, by the way, is an ex-Cruise general counsel. It's interesting to note, who did not recuse himself from voting on these matters, by the way. But it's the PUC basically decides how many vehicles can operate. And the PUC decided in August, it's okay to let Waymo and Cruise operate an unlimited number of vehicles. The DMV didn't really have any big decisions this summer related to robotaxis, despite all this new controversy that really has erupted in the Bay Area just in the last 5 months. The DMV sort of inserted itself into this saga over the last 2 months, first by having the number of robotaxis that Cruise could operate in late August, and now by outright banning them. And I should note, Lizzie, this news came just a few hours ago as we're recording this, in the wake of the DMV revoking the permit for Cruise to operate robotaxis in California. The CPUC did the same thing. So now you've got both entities that are saying to Cruise, you lack authority from us to operate in California, but it's the DMV that went first.
Is this all about this October 2nd incident that we talked about, or are there other layers there?
That's a good question. Cruise is saying it's about the October 2nd incident, and some of the coverage has said that. I am skeptical of that position. I think there's a lot more going on here at the DMV. And part of my reason for thinking that is that it's only about 6 weeks ago that the DMV forced Cruise to have the number of robotaxis in operations in San Francisco at a time when Cruise was ramping up to expand in a big way. So there were clearly problems the DMV saw before this October 2nd incident occurred.
When we come back, what exactly did Cruise tell California regulators? Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back upfront when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you could automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now. Getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $750 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So, just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back upfront when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you could automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply. One of the things that I think is so striking here when we talk about this October 2nd crash is what the DMV said about it. The idea that the Cruise car, tried to stop, but apparently kept moving with this woman underneath it. And the DMV says the department only learned of the AV's subsequent movement via discussion with another government agency, which really it is kind of shocking. Like, oh, well, we only heard about this because our buddies at X agency told us.
That is what it sounds like. And I think we're going to hear more about that. And if you read between the lines of that press release, to put it bluntly, it sounds like the DMV is pissed off. And it's understandable why. But also, I want to be clear, this is not a emotion-driven move necessarily. If you step away and even look beyond the potential misleading footage shared by Cruise, it actually is a really serious thing if the Cruise vehicle was programmed in such a way that even with somebody trapped underneath, a pedestrian trapped underneath, the vehicle didn't know that you could worsen those injuries or even kill someone by moving. That's something that is a huge public safety issue because it is highly unusual for a pedestrian to be trapped under a vehicle, but it does happen. And even putting aside whether Cruise shared the footage in a complete way or not, there's going to be some real questions about the extent to which these sorts of vehicles are safe if the computer is programmed to do something so potentially catastrophically dangerous in a situation like what happened on October 2nd.
What has Cruise said in response to the suspension? And did they address this question of withholding footage?
So they claim that they've shared all information. They dispute the DMV's allegation of withheld footage. They are sticking by their claim that safety is their top priority, which is something that feels questionable, I guess, given the DMV's concerns and what they've now said. But Cruise has shown every intent of fighting this, and it's not hard to understand why. Their growth prospects and their vision for expansion is largely predicated on expanding not just in the Bay Area, but also in Los Angeles, where they were ramping up to launch in the near future.
We reached out to Cruise for comment and did not get a response by recording time. Well, I wanted to ask you about Cruise's safety record, and I guess as I'm formulating this question, it's making me think, what makes an AV safe? Is it all the things that go into making a regular car safe, plus the programming decisions and what kind of data the car and the car's onboard computer systems are ingesting in order to dictate those movements?
There's all of the information that's going to be collected by the car. It's the inferences that are drawn from all the experience that robotaxi company already has. There's all kinds of algorithms that guide that. But here's another thing, Lizzie, that makes these robotaxis a heck of a lot safer. Having a safety driver in the front seat who can intervene if something really bad happens. Like, had there been a safety driver in the front seat of that Cruise vehicle on October 2nd, presumably he or she would not have driven over the pedestrian or dragged them for 20 feet after they were stuck underneath. They would have just halted. And that is something, this need for a safety driver is something that a lot of safety advocates have been pushing for quite a while. And Cruise and Waymo have insisted it's not necessary. I think that in the wake of this horrible crash on October 2nd, there may be new calls to require safety drivers to be in the front seat.
I guess one thing I'm trying to unpack here is whether this is about AV safety writ broadly, whether it's about Cruise specifically as a company, and whether it's about this issue of withholding safety data from regulators, which they really do not like.
Yeah, well, it's definitely partly about withholding information from safety regulators. That's true. I think that it's definitely about the safety of Cruise because that vehicle should not have dragged a pedestrian underneath it for 20 feet. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. And it raises serious safety questions about Cruise specifically. Now, the next question, though, is whether this reflects on robotaxis and autonomous vehicles overall being unsafe. That's a thornier question. Already, I've seen a bunch of AV veterans try to sort of create distance between Cruise and other AV companies, saying, well, maybe Cruise did some bad stuff, but other AV companies would never do that. Waymo and others as well. That, I understand why they're doing that. And I will say that from just talking with people in the industry for a long time now, Cruise does have a reputation for being a little bit more cutting corners with safety compared to its competitors. So perhaps there's something real there. But I think it's a good question to ask, like how much of this apparent disaster of a situation for Cruise is specific to Cruise itself, and how much should it really cast a pall over the AV industry writ large?
Because one of the big selling points of AVs from their boosters is humans make mistakes, humans get distracted, humans do stupid things. Robotaxis do not have that problem. They're not thinking about daycare pickup and, whatever distraction or looking at their phones. How much do we know about whether AVs, writ broadly, compare to cars driven by people?
We really don't know. That's the right question to ask, Lizzie. And we really don't know. We don't have really apples to apples peer-reviewed studies by academics that can really tell us just how much safer robotaxis are compared to human drivers, because it requires really being thoughtful about how you set this up. Cruise and Waymo will argue that they're already safer than human drivers, but those assertions have been hotly debated by external academic experts. So it is TBD. Let's put it that way. And I think sort of like simple way of explaining why it's TBD is that, yeah, it's true that a robot car is not going to drive drunk or drive distracted in the way that we as humans sometimes may. But when you have a robot car, they're going to have computer error. They're going to basically make mistakes because of flaws in their algorithms or because the sensors don't work right or whatever it is. And you end up with them behaving in ways that are dangerous in situations where a human driver wouldn't have a problem really at all. And perhaps, I don't want to go too far here, but perhaps what happened on October 2nd is an example of that, where, again, a pedestrian got dragged for 20 feet underneath a robotaxi that was trying to just get to the side of the street, where a human driver probably would have realized, oh my God, there's someone underneath the car, and you just halt. So the point is, we don't know whether autonomous vehicles are safer than human-driven vehicles, and that requires data analysis that we just don't have yet. It could go either way.
What would it take to know?
It would require being able to compare a whole lot of miles driven by robotaxis and human drivers in the similar types of streets and under similar conditions, times of day, same sort of urban format or rural format, whatever it is. And you want to be thinking about which types of drivers you're comparing the robotaxi to so that you aren't, for instance, doing what Cruise does, which is to compare its robotaxis to ride-hail vehicles, which may not be the best comparison because ride-hail drivers are going to be operating a lot of the time on weekend evenings where driving is more dangerous. And ride-hail drivers are also kind of in a rush a lot of the time to get to places. They're not necessarily a proxy for the average human driver. So that's what you really need to figure out, how to do an apples to apples comparison. And we don't really have that yet.
Right now, Cruise is expanding across the country to Seattle, Austin, Dallas, Washington, D.C., and a handful of other places. But if California says the cars present a risk to public safety there, what does that mean for other states?
It remains to be seen what the DMV move in California is going to do for those expansion plans of Cruise. It would seemingly put them on ice in Los Angeles, and I think also San Diego, actually, are cities in California where Cruise has expressed the desire to expand. But frankly, if I was working at a DMV in Texas or in Tennessee or North Carolina, I'd be looking with a lot of trepidation at what's happening in California and say, well, look, if these vehicles aren't safe enough for California, do we really think they're safe enough here?
I mean, could they just put them on the road with a safety driver, with a person in the car?
Sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, that is something that is still legal in California. The DMV banned Cruise from operating robotaxis without a safety driver, but they still can with one. So perhaps one of the sort of fallouts from this decision of the DMV could be that other states look at requiring safety drivers in more robotaxi deployments, which, by the way, I think would be a very positive step.
The autonomous vehicle market globally is what, $120 billion or something like that. It's huge.
Yeah, it's huge, but it's also highly speculative.
Over the past few years, it feels like a lot of these companies, Cruise has got General Motors behind it, Waymo has got Google behind it. These big companies are putting a tremendous amount of money into this industry. And I'm trying to figure out how big a deal this DMV decision is going to be seen as within those big companies, these companies that are making multi-million-dollar bets.
Or multi-billion-dollar bets.
Or multi-billion-dollar bets.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a big deal. I think it is a big deal. Keep in mind that the two heavyweights here are Waymo and Cruise, right? Cruise is really sponsored by General Motors. I think General Motors has about an 80% ownership stake in Cruise. And Waymo is a subsidiary of Alphabet, which also owns Google. Anyone who's following the news knows that interest rates are rising and that tech companies have been doing a whole bunch of layoffs. This is not a time when, a lot of business unit leaders that are in the red are going to feel very comfortable.
Right, it's not like free money's flying around anymore.
There's really not. So that is sort of like a basic pressure that certainly Waymo is going to feel, and I think Cruise is going to feel too. And that doesn't even take into account the fact that we've got this ongoing labor strike for General Motors, which is further constraining their revenues. So that need to sort of have a sugar daddy of a big sponsor is a real issue. I think that's part of why we're seeing robotaxi companies expand so rapidly in the last few months. They're trying to like keep their investors happy. And when you ask like how big of a deal is this, I mean, California DMV just threw a huge wrench in Cruise's expansion plans and basically sent a pretty clear signal to General Motors that this company is going to be in the red in a big way for the foreseeable future. So it'll be interesting to see how General Motors leadership responds, particularly because it was about a year ago that another big robotaxi venture, Argo AI, that had received over $1 billion in investment from Ford and from Volkswagen, basically just disappeared. Like those companies, those OEMs, the car companies decided we're not going to put more money into it, and it went away. And there's been chatter that's been growing. Like, is there a real risk this could happen to Cruise as well? I won't speculate about that, but I'll tell you that what happened this week with the California DMV is only going to make the financial pressures that Cruise is under more severe.
Well, that's sort of where I was going with this. You have been critical of this industry for some time, and I wonder if there is a way to zoom out, and maybe it's too soon, but to think about this moment. Is this the beginning of the end? Is it a, pardon the very bad pun, speed bump? Is it something truly significant, or is it something we will look back on in 15 years and say, and that was the moment things changed and safety standards got higher? I simply don't know.
I think there's a really good chance this is an inflection point, because Cruise is going to have to do things differently to claw back into the good graces of the California DMV and CPUC. Maybe that'll involve a different arrangement with safety drivers. Maybe it'll involve other sorts of data sharing that sort of set a different standard for the robotaxi industry across other states too. And keep in mind, this is still a very, very early industry. There's a lot being figured out. Or maybe it's going to mean that Cruise really can't recover from this, and we end up with one fewer major player in the robotaxi industry. I don't know, but I do think this is a major moment for the autonomous vehicle world, and it could be an existential one.
David Zipper, as always, it is so great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
David Zipper is a visiting fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's Taubman Center for State and Local Government, where he examines the interplay between transportation policy, technology, and society. All right, that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Evan Campbell and Anna Phillips. Our show is edited by Jonathan Fisher. Alicia Montgomery is Vice President of Audio for Slate. What Next TBD is part of the What Next family, and we're also part of Future Tense, a partnership of Slate, New America, and Arizona State University. And if you like what we are doing here, the best way to support this show is by joining Slate Plus. Just head on over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. All right, we will be back tomorrow with another show. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening.